The wish list. Item 22. Stocking.Christmas security raided the warehouse the next morning and found Nick and Alfie gone. Well, eventually they raided it. First they were led a merry dance. No, wait. To be honest, it wasn't really all that merry. There was quite a lot of swearing and running around in the dark, and not everyone came out of it with their tempers intact. They arrived in the small hours of the morning. There was little point of mounting a dawn raid, since at this point in December, dawn was at about 8 o'clock and people would already be arriving for work. The point of a dawn raid was, after all, to catch your quarry napping, so they arrived at 4 in the morning. Unfortunately for them, the quarry had already been up all night preparing. The quarry would like a nap about now, it was true, but there was no time for it, apparently. Security surrounded the main entrance and the delivery dock with big black fans, and then discovered that when they had remotely locked all the building's doors, they had inadvertently locked themselves out. They had been trying to stop anyone getting out, and now none of them could get in. Finally, after a lot of phone calls during which people stood around in the snow trying to shout quietly — this was supposed to be a surprise raid after all — the doors were opened and they all ran in, attempting to look professional once again. This, of course, absolutely terrified the night shift, who had not been told they were coming, in the spirit of surprise, and so there then followed at least half an hour of them having to calm everyone down, check their credentials, and get them somewhere secure, even before security could enter the warehouse itself. And then the merriment really began, not for them, but for Alfie and Nick, sitting up in the rafters, watching the little gaggles of flashlights spreading out through the darkness of the warehouse. The before-dawn raid had never been secret, of course, at least not to the quarry. There was no point in surreptitiously taking control of the largest warehouse in Europe if someone could just walk in the front door of that warehouse and catch you blissfully unaware. While security had been up all night preparing for their raid, Nick and Alfie had been up all night preparing for security's preparations. This had involved an awful lot of things that Alfie hadn't fully understood. There was a largely piecemeal lecture about back doors, which were apparently secret ways into a computer system put there by a hacker that would enable that hacker to gain access to the system remotely and to activate special functions that they had hidden in the software. Alfie had suggested that he was going to think of these as secret tunnels under the walls of a castle that allowed you to exchange notes with spies you had inside. And Nick had simply sighed, then shrugged, then shaken his head. He hadn't said no, though, so Alfie was going to stick with his metaphor. Then there was an awful lot of packing. For some reason, Nick wanted to build up a backlog of gifts, all of which he had the drones take away somewhere. Alfie didn't have time to ask why. He was too busy slapping address labels on boxes, and Nick wouldn't have answered anyway because he was too busy typing. What he was doing, it turned out, was programming the security robots. He was programming some to think that some members of the security team were intruders, some to think that other members were, some to think that the warehouse robots were intruders, some to think that other security robots were intruders, and some to think that they themselves were intruders. As an added final flourish, he also switched off all the running lights on the warehouse robots. They were still working, rushing around, grabbing items off shelves. It was just now you wouldn't know they were coming until they were almost on top of you. The moment security entered the warehouse proper, he set everything in motion, and all hell broke loose. Security men chased security robots who were chasing security men. Warehouse robots charged around among all of them, and the security robots who were chasing themselves just spun in tight hysterical circles, blaring alarms and flashing their lights. Up in the rafters, all Nick and Alfie could make out of it was sound and light. Manic, twirling beams of torches, the red and blue strobing of security robot alerts, and the shouts of "Over here!" and "Look out!" and "You are in a restricted area. Stay where you are." "Right," said Nick, evidently happy that mayhem had been sufficiently wrought. "Let's go." "Hold on," said Alfie. "There's one more thing I'd like to do." "All right," said Nick. "East loading dock. 10 minutes." Piers Cramp had unconsciously come to the conclusion that over the last few years the world had started to smell of fresh paint. Paint and room scent and cut flowers. This was largely, of course, because the places he frequented these days were luxury. luxury boardrooms and hotels and yachts. And if the place he was in hadn't been luxury before, then every effort would have been made to make it luxury in time for his arrival. Rooms would have been scrubbed and primped and scented. New tables would have been rushed in, comfortable chairs arranged around them, perfectly chilled water and fresh-cut flowers placed on them. This was not true of meeting room gift wrap in the biggest Stocking Dot Christmas warehouse, but the chipped tabletop, the chairs with the wobbly legs, the whiteboard with only partially erased jokes on it, did not register on Piers because he was thinking about other things. He was thinking about the security raid he had come to observe. He was thinking about Christmas revenue, and he was thinking about his old friends Faye Spencer and Nick Close. Unable to sit still, especially on an unstable chair, he got up and went out into the corridor to look through the windows to see if he could see any of the raid going on. He couldn't. What he could see were the empty packing stations where no one was packing packages and no deliveries were going out for delivery, and no one was, consequently, making him any money. No, there was one person. Someone in a branded green warehouse uniform walking down the packing line, leaving a package at each station. A package in a Stocking Dot Christmas box. Piers knew instinctively that each of those packages was a gift off of a packer's Stocking Dot Christmas wish list. But the figure wasn't Nick Close. It was a young man with an unruly shock of red curly hair and a scrubby beard. At that moment, the young man reached the end of the line of packing stations and turned and looked up, almost as if he had sensed Piers watching him. The young man saw Piers standing in the window and grinned a wide grin and waved cheerfully. Piers got the impression that the man was mouthing something at him. Merry Christmas. Then the man turned and jogged away. Piers tried to find security men to chase him, but they were all busy chasing each other in the warehouse, and the men outside were too busy chasing drones, and by the time everyone got themselves organized again, Nick Close and his helper were gone. Long gone.